Good afternoon, everyone. Um, for the benefits, I'm almost thinking here for the benefits of, okay, tech desk. Do I need to be standing somewhere? There we go, it's cleared. All right. I'm almost thinking here for the benefits, particularly of our panelists, and given that we've got such an intimate venue, shall I call it, I promise at this point of the stage we don't bite. So if I can please invite some of the people who are either coming in or sitting further down the back, if they can come a little bit closer, that would be great. Was everybody feeling a bit happier about where they are? There's a few spots in the second rows, third rows, thank you very much. All right, because I do know that there are some people who are coming through from T. Spoo, all your panelists are here? Okay, fantastic. Welcome back to the ABASA conference, Business Indaba, this morning. My name is Lynette Nduli. I may have been mentioned in absentia this morning, and I do apologize, but something is happening on Cape Town roads this morning. We've been sitting in the car for a very, very, very long time. So nobody's more grateful than I am at this point to be here with you. The Business Indaba this morning has already been started and introduced as an initiative of the Business Forum at ABASA. Sbu, as chair of the forum, I'm certainly hoping that you've told our guests gathered here about the various initiatives with the various partners that you currently facilitate and run for the benefit of all of the members, as well as anybody who's really got an interest in what ABASA does, its objectives, as well as the professionals' work. It's also wonderful to see, as part of this conference, so many younger faces. Our student chapters, I know, support ABASA. And it's wonderful to see those younger faces, especially as we begin to talk about, these issues related not just to the economy, but also how we create inclusive growth in an economy, how we create new opportunity. Because the reality of the beast is, as unemployment, inequality, and so many of various socioeconomic ills in particular rise in our country, I'm beginning to get a sense that us, the older folk, don't have the answers anymore. And in fact, the people who may have the answers, the right formulas, and the model answers we're looking for may be trapped in a classroom in grade 8 somewhere. And we just don't know what we don't know. We've tried to solve for X. We didn't foresee a pandemic. None of us had a business continuity risk plan ready for anything of this nature. And here we are, thrust into a brand new world, not just professionally, but also economically, just even the structure of society around us. And so when we begin to speak about the issue of entrepreneurship, the issue of business, and what type of resources and tools need to be availed to both professionals, those who are coming now to join this particular field and space, and all the people around us that we ultimately serve, I think we also need to infuse into it some new ideas. Original South African-led and bred innovation, homegrown formulas, because what we thought we knew clearly doesn't apply. And even in its current application, clearly continues to be as crisis as we are in a world that just changes pretty much every single day. So as part of this conversation, particularly when we bring it and link it to some of the broader themes that ABASA champions, transformation perhaps chief amongst them, and within the context of transformation, not only do we look at the issues of race, not only do we look at the issues of seeing transformation of gender, seeing younger people move into this particular space, but we've also got to begin to see the transformation of who is in control of wealth, who's in control of resources and means in the country, who's making those decisions, as well as then making sure that not just do we shift those controls and means, but we also seed some of the very, very necessary succession planning that we need. None of us are getting younger in the room. And therefore, it becomes important that we already start thinking about what will the next 20 years look like. 22 years ago, it was Y2K, and we thought that was the end of the world. Little did we know. Little did we know. And if you, like me, come from KZN, every 9 months, 6 months, and 3 months, the world seems to end one night, and then you wake up and the world continues the next day. So, these are just some of the new shifts as well when we start to talk about transformation that are coming into this space. Talking about, ethics, and I know that this profession in particular has had to talk about that quite a lot. Climate change. Initially, we always thought about it as something that was so far away from us, our livelihoods, and even an economy, until, of course, an entire country, a city, a manufacturing hub, petrochem lines, electricity even, is no longer, energy is no longer something the world can access. Load shedding has been successfully exported by South Africa. Geopolitics, nobody's immune from the impacts of geopolitics. And how then do geopolitics go on to affect business? If you've bought cooking oil in recent times, and at least 5 liters of cooking oil in recent times, one day it was, 170 Rand for 5 liters? The next day we all woke up and it was 250 Rand for 5 liters. Imagine the impact of the realization that igwinya is now a luxury food item. But that's the truth, right? And at the most micro, the most nano level of entrepreneurship in our country, these major seismic shifts, which start because there's a war, perhaps in Ukraine, or there's an energy crisis in a country like ours, or something has changed in the atmosphere, politically, has changed in how we as a world view ourselves, digitally and otherwise, goes on to affect the most informal and a home-based business in the country. So what I'm also hoping is that the conversation, and to our panelists as well, that we love to keep the conversation sexy, I always say. English is such a sexy language. We love to keep it very highbrow, very sophisticated. But if we shift that now to saying, what does development mean? We need to make it practical. It needs to be the type of solutions that when we walk out of here today, if it doesn't change the way you do things or help you fix something, you can at least take that information using very basic day-to-day examples and analogies and help somebody else transform their challenges. And that's the type of flow and discussion I'd love to see, particularly when we begin to talk about the issue of enterprise and supplier development in our country. Again, one of the things that I always say, transformation is not CSI. It's not charitable. It's the law. It's also critical to come into the center of what it is that we now say become our priorities as a developmental state and a country that does have an economy that is in crisis, and mostly people outside of that economy who stay in crisis. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce Sbu back to the stage, and I'm going to ask him to call his panel guests, and we're going to engage in a far more robust conversation, an interactive conversation, one where we will possibly leave here with new imaginations and new and fresh ideas about who we want to become, but also what it is that we want to seed into the now and the future when we start to speak about the practical support of businesses in the room, businesses outside the room, businesses we are going to go on to serve. Just a few reminders, though, for each of you, is that a little bit later on, we're going to have the Creation Lab. I'm really, really looking forward to that conversation as part of this agenda. And after lunch, There is also the Old Mutual event, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as well later on. If anybody during the course of the next session does need to excuse themselves, I know one of our panel guests may need to excuse themselves for prayer time. It is Friday, and we observe and allow others to observe, their necessary rights. Please feel free to then excuse yourself at that point, and you will rejoin us as the day continues. Sbu, over to you, Slalo.
Thank you, Lynette. So, our next panel discussion is a topic that they touched on in the first panel. I think one of the Standard Bank guys touched on the fact that they work in the enterprise development space. So we delve deeper into this. The topic is enterprise and supplier development within the accounting profession. So we're unpacking it. Exactly what is enterprise development? What is it meant to achieve? And has it been embraced by the public sector and the private sector? And where it has been embraced, has it really focused on the critical areas that aspiring black entrepreneurs really need? Or has it just been a matter of mentorship and coaching, which is important, but not as critical as other matters, as other issues? And this topic of enterprise development, has there been a lot of education and awareness in terms of what black businesses can actually get out of these programs that are being run? Do we know what is out there available for us? Because whilst it is not a relatively new concept than the traditional ways of helping a business, where everybody just think access to funding is the only thing that cripples a small business, do we actually know what is available to an entrepreneur out there? So to unpack this, I would like to invite my panelists to come up on stage. So we've got Tuto Masasa. She's the head of advisory at BDO. We've got Annie McWhorter. She is the SAICA CEO, SAICA ED CEO, also the CEO of the Hope Factory. Uncumisa, she is the MD of Uncumisa Chartered Accountants. We got Ubongani Habile at AXA, is the business unit leader for strategic audit projects. We've got Zakaria Ali, the CFO of Facet. Ngumi Samdabe, sorry I didn't say your surname, I was just looking through it. Please, can you join me up on stage? Thank you and welcome yet again. And I think just quickly, briefly, just a brief background introduction to yourselves, entities you come from, and exactly what is it that you do from an enterprise skills development, supply development perspective, because I understand that maybe your role may not be exactly that, but your organization does do exactly what we're here to talk about. I'll start with you, Zach.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone, and thanks. It's really a pleasure being here. I think from a Facet perspective, so as I mentioned, I'm the CFO at Facet. Jumping straight into the topic of today and what Facet has to offer. Facet runs a range of programs from bursaries, academic support, etc., but specifically linked to supply development. And there is programs such as workplace-based training. There are learnership grants, etc., where firms can basically get grants for their sort of employee cost. Yes, it's a two-way stream. The learner has to benefit from your firm. in terms of training, and then you benefit in terms of their employee cost and having that learner funded in your firm, etc. So that's just the basic area that Facet basically plays in terms of supply development. Thanks.
Thank you. Annie?
Hi. Good. Is it morning still, everybody? SAICA Enterprise Development, it was formed 4 years ago, and a number of the programs we were doing under the Hope Factory in terms of enterprise and supply development actually moved into the entity of SAICA Enterprise Development. And what we do is we partner with the SAICA profession to bring financial excellence into small businesses. So we will do customized enterprise supply development programs for corporate South Africa, and our whole aim is to get financial excellence into the SMMEs. And really, we're linking with the small practices. So ABASA is a very key partner to us. Often when we are looking for small practices around the country, we service both mining companies, renewable energy companies, and pretty much we're quite agnostic in terms of the type of industry that we're working in. But then we would go to the market and find small accounting practices, particularly from a ABASA's perspective. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, sir. It's Nomisa Notaga.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No problem. So what we do is we offer accounting and taxation articles to graduates. We also provide accounting tax advisory services to entrepreneurs. And then we are also providing business management workshops, accredited business management workshops to entrepreneurs. And from my side, it's twofold, because not only have I benefited from enterprise supplier development, I've now also worked my way, or the company has worked its way to become a service provider within those programs, the Hope Factory being one of those programs, Ellen Gray, and speaking on the point of being a beneficiary of enterprise development, all the way from Shanduka Black Umbrellas when it was still around. I think now it's called Black Umbrella only. SAB Toalana, Inyosi Enterprise Development, ORIC, FNB and Zero, through ABASA.
Excellent.
So I have definitely benefited. And I think one of the things that we as a firm still struggle with is that access to market, because as much as we've been on all of these programs, which has really helped us in elevating ourselves and having those internal processes within our business to the point that we are now accredited, however, we're still struggling to get a percentage of the market. We need that stamp of approval, and it can only come from those guys, the bigger guys.
Thank you, Lisa. No tag. I'll never get that wrong. Monks.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. It's actually quite exciting to be talking about ESD, because when I look around the room, there's actually current and past beneficiaries, of the current program that we are running within the AGSA. And one of them sitting on my left-hand side being Tuto. So within the Auditor General of South Africa, we've had the ESD program for about 8 years now. It started in 2014. But when it started, we were doing it in the normal way in which everyone does it, where they look at this thing and they think it's just you giving a grant to someone or just giving them training or whatever the case may be. But that does not benefit an SMME. So we decided, I think, around about 2016, 2017, to actually reevaluate the program and also take into account or take advantage of the space that we play in and tailor it so that it suits our own needs and it also suits the needs of the people we're putting in as beneficiary into the program. So from 2017, we moved away from giving grants, and we started making a real impact to some of the black-owned auditing firms. Currently, we're sitting with about 30 beneficiaries across the country, And when you look at our spectrum at this particular point in time, I was looking at the numbers this morning, we've got about 50 offices that are actually being operated by these black firms. But we'll unpack it as we go along.
Thank you, Bongani. Tuto?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and good morning, everybody. I think it's just great honor to be with all of you this morning. I'm from BDO. BDO, I always say I don't take it for granted. Maybe not everybody has depth of who we are. So we do offer audit, tax and advisory as well as business outsourcing services. We are a 2,200 professional company in South African context. We are globally represented. We've got a presence in 136 countries, about 1,200 offices around the globe. And that gives us access to 91,000 professionals, I think, across the globe. And we've seen tremendous sort of collaboration with also COVID opening up and, many countries coming to the party. Coming back to the ESD, from a BDO perspective, I think maybe we look at it in three different buckets. What we do from an ESD perspective, one is empowering companies, understanding our role in the auditing profession, giving them audit opinions. We often write off some of the fees that some of those companies could pay, understanding the license of what an audit opinion holds in the market for them, to further open the capital markets. So that's the one bucket that we look at ESD from. The second bucket is also the financial support, and not to the extent that the banks and the previous panel spoke of. We do provide financial support, particularly when we talk of working capital, to some of the SMMEs that we work with, and sometimes even our own subcontractors, which is then the third bucket that I'll talk to, but realizing that working capital cycle doesn't become easy. So we do lend money to some of those organizations. And then the third bucket is then partnering within the emerging firms. And I'll talk about, maybe what also Bongani spoke about, partnering within the emerging firms going into, say, hopefully then the larger projects, understanding that access to markets is a critical thing. I think for any entrepreneur, having walked the journey, I often say, yes, you need capital, but capital is one thing. What you do need is access to market, because you really want to sell a product, you want to sell your intellectual capital, you want to sell your services. So maybe that's the three broad categories that we do and support ESD from a BDO perspective. And I think also then taking a step back, having been a beneficiary when I was running my own enterprise, what Bongani spoke about, the most powerful bit was actually having then the offtake in the name of already, an organization like the Auditor General, whilst they support you in the background. And I think as we go on in the discussions, for me, that's a criticality. How do we open markets for the entrepreneurs and to get in the market and actually trade? Because, help is help, but we all really want to trade. But we'll chat a bit more.
Thank you, Tuto. That was very detailed, and that's the kind of detail that I think our audience would appreciate, because we say enterprise development programs. So I'm going to go back to you, Bongani, in the sense that when you say your programs what does it actually do for that beneficiary? And so yes, we know that it has helped, it has assisted, and there are beneficiaries that are out here testifying. But what does it actually do? Just in so much as Tuto has explained in terms of what does BDO do, and that goes for SAICA ED as well, Annie.
Thanks. Am I audible? Okay. Thanks. I think the biggest impact and contribution we have for our beneficiaries is actually access to market. I mentioned when I was talking earlier that for the first 2 years, we were doing it the traditional way, and obviously any organization that is doing ESD will have limited slots based on the budget that you've allocated, for ESD. I think for the first 2 years we had 3 beneficiaries and we had allocated them about 12 million. If you were to ask me now that how many of these beneficiaries still exist, it's only 1. All the other 2 eventually fell off, How we elevated our problem, we identified where the problem is within our profession. And as the AGSA, we were also the contributors to that particular problem. We issued a tender for CWC work. So what we do, obviously, we procure services from CWC firms across the country. But obviously, we issue a tender every 5 years. When we issued that tender, we've got set requirements, that the auditing firms must meet for them to be part of the AGSA database. But when you look at those requirements, they were almost set in a way whereby if you're a large firm, you're in by default. If you're a medium firm, you're in by default. But if you're a small firm, you must actually fight to actually get in. We were not the only problem. One of the key requirements that we've got is that you must have SAICA accreditation. But as a black firm, as a small emerging black firm, when you go to SAICA to say, SAICA can I have accreditation, SAICA is saying you must have enough work to be able to give to those trainees. It becomes a chicken and an egg type of a situation, When we issued those tender results, I think it was in 2016, in December, I got a lot of calls from small black firms that were simply saying, your requirements are exclusionary. We are being left out from that particular perspective, But then, to be able to assist, and I looked at it and I analyzed it, and I'm like, actually, about 71 firms that were disqualified out of the 80 are actually small black firms that couldn't make it. And you look at everyone else that has made it, it's your big firms, medium firms, and your traditionally white firms that were in our system, And obviously, you can't do these things if you don't have a willing leadership that can actually back you, in coming up with initiatives that can actually assist these firms. When we started ESD in 2017, it had started in 2014, but it got triggered in 2017 when we looked at what was happening and we said, what is it that we can do to actually assist these guys so that they can be able to come in and participate? And obviously, we needed to get the go-ahead from leadership. Tsagani back then was still the DAG, and Ubongi was still the CEO. We needed to get their backing. And we got their backing, and then we had to open up conversations with SAICA. We went to the SAICA accreditation committee, we said, SAICA, this is the problem that we're seeing. We literally had to come into an agreement with SAICA to say, if we've got someone that we have adopted into our ESD program, if we issue them a letter of commitment as the AGSA to say, SAICA grants them accreditation, we're coming as the backing to say, we will give them enough work to actually be able to service those particular trainees. So that's one of the first few initiatives. But secondly, we had to visit each and every offices of those people that we are bringing into our program. Because remember, the starting point was us seeing what got you disqualified in the tender. Then we went in, understood their business, understood where do they need support. Because we couldn't do a one-size-fits-all at that particular point in time. You find one entrepreneur, they've elevated significantly. When you ask them what kind of support they need, they'll tell you, we need support from a quality control perspective, or whatever the case may be. You go to another entrepreneur, they tell you, I didn't pay my rent for the past 3 months. Please assist me with that. So we had to make it tailor-made. Obviously, your normal training and all those other things that the people that are only giving grants provide, we also provide those. But then the biggest thing became access to market. When we bring you into our ESD program, yes, you don't meet our full requirements. What we said is that let's give you there's something we call ad hoc allocations. We start you off with an allocation of work, let's say for $1 million. We test how you're doing in that particular $1 million, and then we start topping you up from that perspective. And that is how the guys started getting more exposure. That is how now the guys started opening more branches in other provinces. That is how now the guys could actually go to other government departments and ask for work and actually win work. Because now they've got this reference letter that we're doing work for the AG, so we understand and know the public sector. So that's how we grow it. I'm not sure if I covered you.
Very much covered, very much covered. And Annie, incorporate some of his comments into your response as well from a SACA ED perspective.
Okay.
And just in the direction that you guys are going, because there are many a time, or a few times, not many a time, where you would send us some of the specs and then some of our members couldn't quite qualify,
Okay.
and they feel that the requirements are too high and that they can't meet, and then it becomes a fruitless exercise.
Okay.
So just factor in, you know, in terms of what they had to do as well, in terms of trying to be more inclusive. Yeah.
Great. Great. So I think that that's fantastic feedback for us, and we need to then engage further to see, because what we're trying to do is SAICA Enterprise Development, and by the way, we are an entity that belongs to SAICA. We are actually independent of SAICA, so, but because we use the name, of course, it gets confused quite a bit. But what is nice about it is it can open doors, and what we are seeing is that we can land good contracts in enterprise and supply development, and with a number of small accounting practices, we are able to fulfill that particular contract. So that is what we are seeing is the value add of working with small accounting practices, ABASA members, and people who are running their own practices. We're actually building the ecosystem. So I'm hoping that, you know, we're speaking to most of the people in the room as opportunities for you to do work in enterprise supply development. So I'd like to make the shift of not you as the beneficiary, but you as the person who will be doing the enterprise supply development. So you yourself actually helping to do enterprise supply development for a corporate. So we had the session earlier around banking and the fact, and funding, and the fact that SMMEs don't have a track record. Those are some of the key issues that we want to solve in terms of SMME development, is with the help of the accounting practices, we can put, you know, proper systems in place into small businesses. So what we do is we usually run a program for a year for a SMME. We do a business diagnostic upfront, and we look at what are some of the things that are missing in terms of financial management, financial processes. And then there is a development plan that gets worked, and monthly coaching is taking place with a CA or an AGA. We prefer to use those designations. And the role of the chartered accountant not being someone who's, on the auditing side, but more on the business advisory side, is what we're looking at. So we may be shifting towards that, where the future of the CA is going, business advisory. Because, you know, you're getting the automation, you're getting, well, you're most affected as a profession. So how does the profession differentiate itself? And what we are seeing is that our CA-led firms, small accounting practices, are excellent business coaches. And so that is one of the things that needs to be the shift in terms of how we work together, is we're coming in to this conversation saying we want to partner with you to bring financial excellence into small businesses. Okay, again, you yourself need to run your own business, and perhaps it is then that through the working with us, you can see what needs to be in place, you know, to assist and to get those particular contracts that you're talking about. So talk to us, you know, maybe if our criteria are a bit too high, then we can tweak it, because we want to actually grow small accounting practices with these interventions. Yeah.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you so much. No, that's more clarity. Misa, I heard you saying, Alan Gray, I heard you say, you know, all these entities that you're beneficiaries of. And I'm sure many of, you know, small business would be like, how does she do it? Because I don't even have one, you know, or two. So when's it kanjani, you know? So what advice, and Tuto, this goes for you as well, that you've been, you know, a beneficiary and a successful one at that. What advice can you say, or, you know, because one of my intro was, is there enough awareness? Or is it just a select few who know what is out there in the market? And you happen to be one of the the few that took advantage of what was there, at your disposal. So how can I advise my business forum members in terms of how to go about to, to take advantage of these opportunities? Because that's essentially what the business forum is about, opening access to markets, and capacitating the small businesses.
Okay. I think for me, I'm quite an inquisitive person by nature. I'm a bit of an introvert, and that I understood at quite an early point in my life. So I work at it in terms of trying to shift the way in which I see myself or how I can approach others. So what I saw quite early on is, because I'm based in Port Elizabeth, a lot of things happen in Cape Town, Johannesburg. So I made friends in Johannesburg and Cape Town and started networking in that manner. And how I tend to come across these programs is, most of the time they specifically say only Cape Town and Johannesburg. And I challenge that, and I'm like, South Africa is big, You can't just limit me because of my geographic location. So I've learned to speak up more. And also understanding that as an entrepreneur, there's no one standing behind you who's going to speak on your behalf. You need to speak for yourself and actually emphasize and explain that this is my need, it is hurting here. And it's only through that I've been able to be a beneficiary of all these different programs, not keeping quiet. That's worked for me.
Sure.
Tuto?
Sure. And I would like to relate that question maybe even to the work that I'm doing now. We talk about sustainability, we talk about ESG, it has become big headlines, to a large degree. What does that mean really practically, when we just take the S of it, the social element of it in the South African context? And it's actually maybe linked, social and economic, somehow very much linked. So the one thing that I could say to an entrepreneur today, I think you really do need to understand your value add to an organization that is to support you as well. And paint that picture for that organization, because this ESG and sustainability matter, it's not a buzzword. It is a strategic imperative, not only for South Africa, but for the world. Yeah. We'll leave environmental issues aside. Governance issues are important for us, and we've seen them in this country. Social is really critical, and we've seen some very good examples of how they can pan out. Longmen could be one of them, the examples that we take as an example, where then the social issues kind of then have gone wrong and could potentially impact an organization that is contributing largely into the economy of this country. So there is direct and indirect sort of impact. So, so I would really, really encourage us to do a lot more introspection as, entrepreneurs, business owners, to just understand your value proposition as a start. Because convincing a big organization, just take me on your program, remember there's also a level of grudge purchase that they are doing. Okay, I've got to do this from a regulatory perspective, but it really is not a regulatory matter. It's actually an economic value add. So let's then meet them halfway in understanding how is this actually going to benefit and unlock your strategy as an organization, and in turn as well, calling even our government, this is the value that it then unlocks for the economy at large.
I get you, and it makes sense. It makes sense. And I think that's one of the difficult things, because many an entrepreneur won't understand the value.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of going back to the drawing board and deriving what is your value, which kind of says you need to go back to your strategy and understanding your business. So, well, that is another dimension that I didn't think of. Okay, thank you very much, Tuto. A lot of buzz in terms of access to markets. What happens to those that did gain access to market and then they can't deliver because they don't have capacity? capacity in the sense of a workforce, in the sense of resources. So one of the initiatives of the Business Forum was to say, okay, we've got a group of small firms where one can't deliver work because of capacity. We can collaborate staff amongst ourselves as the Business Forum to say, I've got unoccupied trainees here. They can, something like that in terms to strengthen the workforce. So I think I'm going now to use a career in terms of capacitating from a workforce point of view. How can you capacitate small businesses who have gained entry into the market and now they need to deliver, but they're short on, or they can't really afford to pay in a workforce that would enable them to do that?
Thanks. I'm listening to the other panel, and I'm thinking to myself, it's not a one approach type of thing. You're not going to go and say, here's the answer, and we're only running on this lane. You have to look at it from multiple perspectives, and you have to see opportunities from all angles. And you mentioned pooling. Pooling between firms, yes, it's going to get you somewhere, but it's not going to get you so far. Each firm is still going to look at what's my profitability, how much I'm going to take home, how much I'm going to spend. So from a facet perspective, we look at that in terms of who are you bringing into your firm? Where are the graduates coming from? And we're pushing employment, so much unemployment, etc. So what is the benefit for you bringing on these unemployed into your firms? So at Facet, there's multiple ways. One is the direct work placement into the firm, where we'll say, bring these unemployed graduates into your firm. We will pay the salaries for those individuals. So that's one way. And on a monthly basis, you'll submit, okay, I brought on 10, etc., criteria to be met, and we'll pay those invoices. So that directly benefits your employee cost and your profitability and your sustainability as well. But apart from that, you'll get a graduate that's coming through, and I'll take an example of a CA stream, where you get someone in from university, but now they're in there, and now they need to pay ICT fees, APC fees, and the learner is like, I can't afford this, I'm expecting my employer to take on that. And the employer is saying, hey, I'm also under pressure. So that's another stream where Facet comes in and pays for those professional body exams throughout the period, up until the qualification comes. So that's probably another way. And then the last way is actually something we call in our program the learnership grant. So you take on the learner, you fund the learner. So at entry point, you'll say, I've got so many. You submit to Facet, I've taken on so many, and you'll get a grant back in terms of how many you've taken into your workforce. But it doesn't only stop there. You still keep them on in the second year. So you also have a role to play in terms of don't just take them for one job and then you leave them sort of. In the second year, you'll get another grant, and obviously in completion as well. So those are the three types of areas holistically that directly impact on the firms itself.
What are the requirements from Facet's perspective? Can I just walk in there and I say, I want all these three, or what must I do? What must I pay? What are the requirements?
So obviously, the requirements is you must be able to host that learner. You must be able to give that learner the training. You can't take on 10 learners. However, you only have capacity, or you only have work for 2. So that obviously we'll be able to pick up from the proposal that you don't have the capacity. We won't give you the 10, but you'll get the 2. So those are. I know I'm just touching on one aspect, but obviously you must basically prove that I will be able to host these learners and I do have enough work for them. Because although it's the benefit for the firm, we also want to make sure that the learner is getting the correct training. The learner is getting to that professional designation. You're upskilling the learner as well. And just to not to digress too much, we also want to show the learner that's coming through the system that it is possible to own my own firm one day. So you get the learner to go through the correct training and get the right exposure. So from the start, they can aim to say, that's where I'm going, and I will own my own firm one day. So that's the two approaches.
So it's just operational requirements, no financial requirements. Do you have to pay levies? Because we talk about levy paying employers, because if you're a small business and you don't have trainees or learners, then you're not an employer at that point in time. So what does then Facet do in that regard in terms of the applicant to get these benefits was not a levy payer?
So there's two. Sorry. There's two types of programs that we run. One is for the levy payers directly, but we do also have for the non-levy payers. So your startups that don't have a salary cost of 500,000, you fall into that category, and there are programs for those smaller firms to access that type of funding.
And then can I just
Yes,
also
please
add? So in SAICA Enterprise Development's model is financial excellence. We've got the back office accounting support that we offer SMMEs as part of enterprise development. So that's funded by corporate enterprise development. So as a small accounting practice, you can get paid for that in certain instances. And there we run a graduate program. And so it's a little bit of an alternative maybe. We're not looking at the CA stream. There's 3 designations for SAICA, the CA, AGA, and ATSA, the Accounting Technician South Africa. We're looking at graduates who can become accounting technicians. They're brilliant as bookkeepers. They need supervision. For you as the owner of the small accounting practice, you need to supervise what they're doing. But they can do the actual financial, looking at your keeping of the records. And we get that funded through the Youth Employment Service. So the Youth Employment Service gives a certain stipend. You would need to top up slightly because, you're looking at a graduate. You're still looking at a graduate, but they also become an accounting technician, so you don't need to have the whole, kind of everything you need to be able to host a CA trainee. Yeah.
I think I need to have a meeting.
And by the way, we also use the accounting practices for coaching, which we pay, right? We pay, that's some of the opportunities, and getting them ready for funding. So looking at the diagnosis of, kind of funding diagnosis and that type of thing. So those are also aspects that we use accounting practices in our enterprise and supply development programs.
I think it's a matter of understanding, and I think, really, not on a joke side, I need to sit and understand these programs in detail, because I get a lot of emails, and then I don't know how to answer them, because even me, I'm in the, I'm not in the know. But this is interesting stuff that there is, and this is the help that is critical, and that people think they can't access it just because of lack of information. So
I
really
personally know of
awareness.
2 practices that have built their practices off the SAICA ED model.
Are there ABASA Business Forum?
I don't know.
You see.
Peter Sariti and Kumalo.
Yeah, so we need to, like I'm saying, we don't want it to be an elitist thing.
Yes.
Where only a few benefit. We want to do it mass. We want to grow our membership. We want to add value, real value to our members. So this is proper insight. And I think we should do more engagements. Misa?
I just want to ask in terms of, Facet is here, so I'm going to take the opportunity.
Curious.
So we are accredited. We've applied for those grants. We haven't heard anything. We haven't even received an acknowledgement of application, So I currently have 9 such learners, and
In the hot
I mean, they're right here. So So it's quite tough. I mean, as you mentioned, you are quite aware these are graduates. And we've currently been funding them out of the business, which is fine. But in terms of me now, or us planning for next year, we're going to be in a bit of a trouble if Facet doesn't get back to us. There's 9 of them. So, yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there. Maybe we can talk after this.
No, there's, yeah, so thanks. There's something that I wanted to add as well. So what we're starting to introduce is that if you've applied for funding and you did not get funding, for example, we're starting to implement a system where we call all those who have applied and said, listen, this is where your firm is falling short, this is the requirements that you still need to make, etc. So something like you were saying, you know, that capacitation in terms of what is it that Facet is really looking at, and what is it that your firm is missing, or it could be something minor that you can implement on your side. You know, just to meet those requirements and that. So that feedback session will definitely start very soon. But if you're not getting feedback, yeah, we can.
Does that mean that is a regret? Because for me, it's about the communication. So if there is something, acknowledge the application. And follow up with a, we regret you were not successful. So right now, we literally been waiting, and we saw the window opened again, and we're like, but we haven't received anything from the first window initially. So we holding thumbs, we don't know what it means. Does it mean that the process is still underway? So it kind of puts us at a point where we don't really know, should we apply in the second window? Maybe our application didn't reach you guys, etc. So, yeah.
No, definitely the acknowledgement, the regret letters, as well as the award letters, definitely do come out from the system. If it's not coming out, obviously we can explain what the status is. Maybe the evaluation process is not completed, or there was some issue within that process that we can maybe explain and just give some feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, okay, that's great. But there is a plan, there is a way. Okay, oh, that's excellent. We've been talking about opportunities. What can go wrong? I think, Bongani, you touched on that when you started your ED program, there were 3, and now there's only 1. What did those other 2 do? What did they do?
It was before my time at the age. But the long and short of it, there's a couple of problems we have within our profession. And I'm talking ESD, thinking about guys that are running their own auditing firms as practices. The first problem we have is that we don't go into running these practices because we are deliberate that we want to run the practice. We go there because we are tired of the 8 to 5. We're tired of working for someone else. We want to work for ourselves. That's the first biggest problem. The second one then is I guess for those 2, it was the access to market. You know, you go into these ESD programs, they give you a grant. You still don't have revenues. You still can't afford to hire people. You know, you apply to Facet, they don't respond.
Amanda.
You know,
and you should be the last one to talk.
so it's one of those. But for me, the biggest issue here is access to market, and I wish that there was a representative from the Big 4 firms, you know, in this panel,
True.
where we could ask deliberate questions that, what have you guys done in this particular space? You know, because they've got these programs that they call ESD programs. But the guys that are sitting in those ESD programs still don't have access to private sector work. You know, the guys have access to public sector work because we've opened up that market. You know, to date, you know, if we look at as at the end of the end of March this year, just the previous financial year, and we had allocated about 257 million to the guys that are in our database. But then, I'll make an example. Let's use Deloitte Mwachoswi from there. Deloitte takes you into the ESD program, but instead of giving you exposure to the private sector, they bring you back to come and do work in the public sector. Something that you've got access to, yourself directly. Yeah. So those are some of the problems, but the guys are also not reinvesting in their businesses. They don't diversify their portfolios. We've got lack of collaboration within the profession. It's going to take us many, many years to actually see another black medium firm or another black large firms, because there's no collaboration. We're holding on to our surnames as the names of these entities. We're holding on to the bank account.
Yes, Tutu.
And Spoo, you talk about maybe some of the pitfalls that we all can then say, what is then the way forward? And Bongani has touched on a very important point on reliance on one or two accounts.
Yep.
And it's not only in our profession.
Yep.
We can talk about the mining sector in terms of observations of our clients, where they say we give, an opportunity, and we've grown small to medium enterprises from your 10 million to above 100 million, sort of maybe organizations. However, the reliance on us, it is too much of a burden. Then how then do we actually rally around the current entrepreneurs in the profession and beyond the profession to then say, what is it that we then need to do to actually look beyond the one opportunity that you get? Yep. We've seen many examples within the profession, large account, and you then say the sustainability and what has that particular then firm gone beyond and done. And it's not a criticism, I'm just saying it is a bit of a crisis, and how do we rally around and solve for it? Because you often find it's 1, 2, maybe to 4 partners, they're operationally involved and consumed by this particular one big account. From an entrepreneur perspective, if you're running, let's assume, some kind of maybe a solution for a mining, you also are one-man show, and you're very consumed on the operational aspects, looking at BD, looking at marketing, looking at actually the strategic hat of then growth path for your own organization is a little bit fuzzy. I understand it, being an entrepreneur, but then how do we move beyond that?
I just want to add on that, and I'm glad Tuto is raising that point. But maybe one day we need to have a discussion to say what causes that reliance on one account. We're sitting with that problem as the AGSA at this point in time, that a lot of the firms that are in our database, if you were to close the tab on them, they'd be gone. They must say thanks to Bolani, who is lenient towards them. Because we sit with a problem where people are even failing quality, but we're like, let's give them a penalty instead of saying, let's suspend you, because once we do that, you're gone.
Sure. Wow. But so what causes the reliance is obviously the issue, goes back to the issue of access to markets as well. Because obviously you don't want to rely on one client yourself, but you just can't. I think the next panel, the Creation Lab, there's an MOU that we've signed with KPMG, where 2 of our members of the Business Forum have entered into that program where they are doing joint audits with KPMG, and I think we'll have more insights coming out of that, the good and the bad, because also the bringing in of two firms, can have some glitches. It's like bringing 2 women in one kitchen or 2.
Those 2 firms are also part
Two
of our
mechanics
program.
to one car.
Those 2 firms you're talking about,
Yes.
they're also part of our program.
You see, we can't have no. We need to open it up because it's just the same people all the time. And I think that's what creates resentment towards us not collaborating and working in silos. So I need more awareness. We're going to drive more and more awareness around this, because I don't think it's a matter of lack of sharing, but it's, let me say you said, but you had an inquisitive mind. I think we need to start being inquisitive in terms of how do we get out of this, hole that most of us find us in. All right, I think from my side, I am done. I'm going to open it up to the floor in terms of any questions. You're going to help me, Lazarane. Thank you.
Thank you, Spu. Ashley from ABASA, past president. I just want to also just congratulate AGSA for the work that they've done for Ngani with opening up the market for public sector. And I think in my tenure, our response was the very same thing that Spu was speaking about on the back of what AG has done in the public sector. And we've recognized that our members have there's a big risk, as you rightfully mentioned, that if they pull a plug, if they fail quality, the public and AGSA is the only client, I mean, they're not going to survive. And then the pipeline from trainee to qualification is hindered. So with the signing of the KPMG, yes, we only got 2 firms, but it is a pilot, and we are looking at opening it up. And there is other discussions with other firms. But again, for a small black firm to pivot into private sector comes with a lot of moving around and trying to see how they can actually get that. And yes, to your point about, I mean, this is the aspiration of why we started, is that we've got a missing big black, indigenous black firm, right? There is a missing part that's there. And as ABASA, this is the platform where like-minded people will come together and collaborate. And I think the cooperative word is collaboration. It's very important for us to actually access that market. So I think, the challenge has been put to ABASA, and our response is the business forum, is the various involvements in that. And I think I'm sitting with the chair of the council that's managing the relationship with KPMG, and I think we've identified that is a bit of a conflict, because we've got to hold KPMG accountable. So we've got past presidents and individuals that are actually looking at that. But I think we'll go into a bit more detail in the next one. But I think we've recognized the risk, and as a ABASA, we are responding to that. But again, big ups to AGSA for the work that they've doing to actually grow the profession.
Actually, just a comment from my side. If I recall, the KPMG partnership started in 2019 when you were still president. You and I engaged on it. What other engagements have we had with the other big firms to actually come on board? And I think when you presented that to me, I said to you, look, we're doing our part in the public sector, and I did highlight some of the problems we have in the profession. But in what other engagements have you guys driven with the large firms to actually come on board? Because we're not seeing that a lot coming through.
100%. So we launched that MOU in 2021, last year, actually. Okay. So it's run its kind of course. There has been positives and negatives with specifically with KPMG, but there has been other engagements with the other firms, and hopefully there's an announcement that's going to be made soon once the MOU is closed. But I think a lot of the firms, when we presented it, and I said this here, tongue-in-cheek, is that they use BE as a competitive edge. And I mean, transformation is not a competition, right? It's an imperative. And that's what we're trying to drive with the firms, that it's not about you making announcements, etc. It's a national importance for us to actually get that going. So there has been discussions, and I think there's a bit of, there hasn't been resistance. I think they're all doing their own bits with certain firms, and as Spu rightfully said, is that we need to open up the market. We get requests. The past presidents, when I was a president, asked me, can someone audit an asset company, right, or a private equity company? And to be quite honest, there's not a lot of firm that has that skill. And the only way to get that skill is to partner with a bigger firm that has that opportunity and has grown that skill set. So it's going to take a bit of time, but I think as the new leadership needs to agitate this conversation much more. I hope I answered your question.
There's an additional comment from one of the Business Council members.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the very thought-provoking panel. Specifically, just to add on to Ashley's commentary, my name is Bujani Sutua, and I'm also a chartered accountant by profession and an ABASA Business Forum Council member, led by past President Sapi, and we've been working very hard to actually sign on Big 4, Big 5 audit firms, and we actually far down the line with signing one up as well. I think the key really would be to not just lobby ABASA in the way that you are, but to also lobby Audit and Risk Committee members and Audit and Risk Committee chairpersons, because that's really where the pipeline of work will come from. I myself am an NED, and I chair various different Audit and Risk committees for JC listed cos, for SOCs and very large private sector companies. And they are actually the decision makers in terms of the law. So the Companies Act requires the audit committee to appoint an auditor. And it is in those opportunities where the audit firms will get the work. So I would challenge ABASA, and I have, and I've spoken quite extensively to President Linda, past presidents as well about this, that you should be tapping more into your NEDs and your Audit and Risk Committee chairpersons who are members of ABASA, and put out a call to action for them to drive this specific, aspect of getting work to small SME firms. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the thought-provoking questions, and my question is directed to AG. Sorry about that. I'm not hearing strategies in terms of us looking beyond South Africa. And I don't think at this point in time in 2022 we should just be talking South African context. We are in Africa.
Yes.
And I guess the world is global, right? I'm hearing you talking SAICA. What are the plans to include other professional bodies, because we do have SMEs who are participating in South Africa and beyond South Africa. So I think that's my first question. But I was a bit worried, Bongani, when you said quality is compromised. The minute quality is compromised, then there's a number of things that are compromised. And I don't think we can afford that as a country, based on where we come from, what we have experienced. Because the minute quality is compromised, there's a lot at stake. So I think we need to start thinking beyond South Africa. We need to start thinking Africa. As a continent, there are so many opportunities. And I want to believe that the big 4 firms, guys, they cannot accommodate all the SMEs. And I think it's important for AG and many other companies to really start thinking beyond. But thirdly, the issue of funding. I think we need to come up with, I'm not sure if anybody can actually respond. What are the strategies that you are looking at to ensure that these SMEs are sustainable? We cannot be relying on FACET. We cannot be relying on AG for funding. But we need to move beyond the funding processes within the profession. Thanks.
Jeez, that is a very that is a very difficult question, especially looking into Africa one. If perhaps Mwahi was sitting here, I'd ask him to take this question. But I'm sure he made a note of that because he's working very close with the AG office, so he's closer to that information than I am. But I've taken note of your question. From a quality perspective, we've seen what has happened in the past when we pulled the plug on someone, and Tuto can tell you she was part of Ngongi, at the time, and then KPMG is still suffering that fate, you know. We're not saying we're being lenient when it comes to quality, you know. But what we're doing currently, we're actually walking the journey, you know, with all the firms that are in our database. The most biggest thing now is ISQM, you know, that has been very topical. There's a lot of work we're doing to actually assist the firms to ensure that they are ready, you know, because remember, they feed into our own system of quality management. So if they don't have their houses in order, we get impacted as the AGSA as well. And we also give more support, you know, in terms of, if you think of the SOEs, currently you've got Deloitte running and ESCOM audit. We've got our people that are there, you know, to actually focus on the key aspects, being your AOPO, your compliance, and predetermined objectives, or whatever the case may be. You know, so there's a lot of support that we provide, you know, and we believe in giving someone an opportunity to do right, you know. But now if you become a second offender, third offender, then we need to cut ties with you, because you're not just impacting us as the AGSA, but you're impacting the entire profession at large. We know the stories that have been very topical in the past 5 years within the profession, you know. Issue of funding, I think that question, yeah, it was addressed briefly in the last session when the gentlemen were here, but they're all talking loans, you know. There's no one that's saying, okay, there's a grant. I got worried. I was sitting there waiting because I even told him, you know, the gentleman here said you must rely on friends and family, you know, to fund you. And I said, and I'm like, but I don't have that kind of family that can be able to fund my business. You know, so clearly I'm going to sit with my idea and die with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
Sorry, can I just add on the Africa bit?
And then you need to close.
Sure. I just want to challenge maybe back to the ABASA Business Forum, and happy to engage as well, because I don't think that issue should be the Auditor General's issue. Really should be business owners that are getting together under the umbrella of perhaps an organized sort of group of people like an ABASA to then say, I mean, we've got the free trade agreement that we've just signed now. How much have we participated? To then say, what does that mean for one, ourselves and an industry, and how do we unlock that value? Even we have the responsibility for clients, right? We are leaders in this country in terms of really igniting the economy. So how do we take the rest of then the South African companies, because we can see our economy is sort of shrinking. So how then do we expand beyond the shores, or at least the economy of South Africa? But really, I do not think it is rightfully in the AGSA. We should be engaging a lot more under perhaps under the umbrella of ABASA.
Good afternoon. My name is Andile Kumalo. Thank you to everybody on the panel and all the work you do in supporting smaller, should I say, mostly black-owned firms. I just wanted to share some thoughts on the biggest question of access to markets, which I think we all agree is probably the biggest challenge. And so enterprise and supply development, and there's a reason why it's got supplier there, assumes that there's an alignment of interest from everybody that's playing the value chain, right? So in our group, we've got a business called I'm an Entrepreneur. In fact, we're a client of SAICA ED. Thank you, Annie. And what we do with SAICA ED, just to give context, is we manage ESD programs on behalf of South Africa's biggest corporates. And so we would come up with a program. Let's use Coca-Cola as an example, which is a real example. And that program almost typically always involves some kind of accounting and tax support for the SMEs. So we go to SAICA ED, and they tell us, we've got these hundreds and hundreds of small businesses and small firms around the country. We will charge you X to do the work for those SMEs. And essentially, Coke pays the firm to do the work for the SME. Very aligned, everyone's interests aligned, it works out. The SME wants the help, Coke wants the help for the SME because it's part of their supply development program. And SAICA, instead of me running around the country and finding firms in Bloemfontein and Mpumalanga, etc., they do that because they've got the network. But what I often find is that from an ESD perspective for small accounting firms within our ecosystem, there's not always an alignment. So from an AG perspective, a small firm, a ABASA, for example, is a supplier to the AG, because the AG's model does involve you using other private firms to support you in the audits of various kind of public sector entities. So this is not new for you. You're not trying to do something that is CSI or whatever. You do it all the time. You've been doing it since the beginning of time. So it's well within your groove. What I've noticed is that with the big firms, it's not necessarily in their groove. Especially because the Masas of the world want to one day be the Deloittes of the world. So it's kind of tricky now for me as this big firm that's supporting Emma and her team. And at the beginning it's all nice when Emma and her team are
Supporting
small.
your competition.
It's not so great when she now has not 10 trainees, she now has 300. And the clients in the other end are under BE pressure. Now suddenly maybe I'm not transforming as quick as Emma's firm is. Emma's now got capacity, she's got skilled people, she can do the most sophisticated work. I'm no longer the ESD facilitator. Now I got a real competitor in MASA. So I think just using the example of the Cork and SAICA ESD program thing, I think what maybe ABASA Business Forum, SAICA, and all of us in the ecosystem need to think about is how do we align the interests so that it never gets to a point where I suddenly now start getting nervous about this beast that I've created. And maybe that's why I'm apprehensive now, is because back of my mind I'm thinking, developing this MASA here is going to be a problem for me in 10 years' time. So I wanted to raise that as kind of a flag, and I'm not sure to what extent have we thought about it. Second point I wanted to raise as input is the reason why it's easier for my team to go to Coca-Cola and say, we've got SAICA ED who'll solve this problem for you, is because what SAICA ED has almost created is a platform for the private sector to buy the skills we sell as a profession. And because SAICA has a strong brand, I don't have to meet Kumalo and Associates, Takane and Associates, Mang Mang and Associates, do some kind of vetting. I'm not sure who they are, where they're from. So I think there's a lot of value in creating some kind of a platform where not only smaller clients, but even larger clients, for as long as there's pressure on transformation, which is a good thing in my view, for all corporates to try and find as many black suppliers as possible in their value chain, I think there will always be a demand, even from the private sector, for black firms. But I think it's harder for private sector to buy black firms because it's just easier to buy the big firms because it's what they've always done. So we need to find a way to make it a little bit easier. And I understand we can put the blame on them and say they could try better, but we all know, I mean, corporates don't wake up every day trying to try better at transformation, okay? They don't. So we gotta make it so easy for them that it's hard for them not to do it. And I think the model that the Business Forum here, ABASA, has got, what SAICA ED has kind of done so far, is probably the right way. Let's use the credibility we've got in our institutions to create like a platform where it's easier to buy. And our little experience in a different sector, or rather maybe segment of the market, which is the smaller businesses, I can't see why it couldn't apply to bigger companies. That when you need a due diligence done or other services, you can click into a platform and you can get access to many black women-owned businesses that you could potentially run an RFP or kind of a pitch process and use them, as opposed to just simply doing what's always easy to buy. You know, there's an old adage about nobody gets fired for buying IBM. The reason why that's said a lot in IT circles is because nobody got fired for buying IBM, even if the IBM solution wasn't the best. But I think we can create an environment where people can get access to better solutions and not necessarily the easy big one. Thank you.
Thank you everyone, and thank you Chair. This is Moahi, formerly from Deloitte, currently from AGSA, which is why Melanie keeps throwing a few things at me. But I thought I'd provide a little bit of perspective. So part of what I used to do in the past was actually running a bit of the ESD program at Deloitte. And I say running, it's perhaps stretching it a little bit in terms of what was actually happening at the time. So my responsibility was partially pulling together the information for the BE scorecard and making sure that we've gathered up the points that we require. And there were some particular successes that I think were as a result of really ingraining the purpose into what we were doing. So instead of saying that we're doing this for the scorecard, instead of saying that it's being driven from a center, what we found was actually really effective was actually just saying that, well, let it be run from any particular part or division as it would be. What we found was the solutions that were being presented were a little bit more, and I think Bugatti, you touched on it, were directly associated with where the risks were for that particular entity, and also they resulted in better results at the end of the day. And Andile, you spoke about it, that you often found that at some point in time you had to stop, pause and say, well, this is now my competitor. And there are contracts out there that are asking me to develop my competitor so that that competitor can fundamentally replace me in future. This is ultimately going to result in a significant business risk, and therefore I can no longer go into that contract. And it certainly happened with certain other firms. I suppose I'm not at Deloitte anymore, but a certain three-letter firm, we had to actually deal with the fact that we couldn't actually engage as closely as we had in the past. The nature of the support had to change. So I think one of the substantial challenges to this, and one of the key failures that I see, is where you see entities, and Bongani, you spoke about it. If you look at how the Big Four became the Big Four, in particular the country, outside of the name, if you remove the name and you just look at the sheer extent of the clients that they actually possessed, it's because of consolidation, it's because of mergers that have occurred over time. And I remember Tandeka Zondi 10 years ago speaking about the very same thing, and it wasn't a new concept back then, and we said we need consolidation in order to be able to make this a success. But some of the examples that we've seen of those attempted consolidations have been fundamentally flawed, because you've got individuals who are trying to be at the helm of these. These are just power grabs trying to consolidate something that actually ought to run a bit better than the way it should be. And what this results in is that it fails once again, over and over and over again. And for me, I find that such a significant tragedy, because we will never be able to actually achieve what we're targeting if we aren't able to actually let go of the things that we fundamentally, I suppose, it's letting go of our egos and the inability to be able to get there. And then final comment, I think one of the big failures even then that we saw was organizations that would literally take an individual off the street and give them a laptop on day one and send them home, and on day two you are expected to actually start the new job. So there you have not actually provided any value. What you've done is that effectively you're just saying, I'm going to take a skim over the top and I'm not actually going to contribute. And what does that do for the ultimate objective of BE? It makes us go so far back, and it means that all we are is actually just effectively a front at the end of the day. And you see that affects the quality of the individuals that you get. When a firm will send you a person who does not even have the right qualification for what you require, and as you actually sit down and you engage with that individual, you realize that actually I'm not actually gaining anything here, I'm actually losing by virtue of supporting this organization, and you end up having to cut ties. So I guess the broader comment is that when we speak about quality, we need to make sure that we've got our A game. When we speak about what the future ought to look like, we need to appreciate that it's got to be consolidated, because the only way we'll be able to create the globally relevant firms is by virtue of us removing that concentration risk of only having clients locally, but being able to create Africa-wide firms, being able to create global firms that will effectively be taking away from the business from Deloitte in the USA. Yeah.
Okay.
By way of introduction, I'm Kolile Ndundu, COO of Black Umbrellas. We actually have a working relationship with SAICA ED, who provide coaches for businesses that are going through our incubation program. So as a way for us to expand our capacity pretty much risk-free, we make use of their services so that we can expand our capacity as and when we need to, which is fantastic. So we need to do more of those. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points, referencing, of course, a few people in the room, but all really centered around the concept of collaboration. So Tutu, I think, mentioned that we kind of need to get to a place where we are lifting the conversation from just speaking about ESD and SED and start talking the language of ESG and UN SDGs with the view to try and access international funds that go towards environmental, social, and governance projects. And where but Africa would such funds, cheap financing, so to speak, where but Africa would those funds be most effectively deployed, or where better than Africa could those funds be effectively deployed? Because the opportunity that we sit on as a country is that when it comes to the implementation of the ESG and UN SDG principles, we are much further ahead than the rest of the world. Because we were forced by our BE legislation to start thinking about the implementation of CSI projects, as well as the implementation of ESD in a very practical sense. So what you generally then tend to find is that even the worst ESD service provider in South Africa is much further ahead than the best ESG service provider in the world. Because in the world out there, there's a concept called greenwashing, where ESG service providers actually just help you to report green rather than do green. So where you'll find that even entities, I don't want to mention names, but those people that make sports shoes will tell you that they've recycled 20 tons of waste from the oceans and incorporated that into their products. But when you look at, as a percentage, what that 20 tons of plastic is compared to the real plastic that they use in their products, you find that it's infinitely small, but because it's reported as 20 tons, it sounds impressive. So just to come back to collaboration then, to say that there's actually nothing stopping us from collaborating with each other. There's nothing stopping us. If anything, I usually say that the only thing, or the only issue I find, is that we don't want to apply ourselves, because the technology already exists for all of us to collaborate in a way that would not take away from self-interest. Because if we've got a shared self-interest in creating shared value, why not collaborate? Because of course we know that 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. So by pursuing your self-interest in the collaboration, you are actually pursuing a shared interest from which everybody can then benefit. So as I'm saying, in my view, there's nothing stopping all of us from collaborating. The technologies already exist. I mean, if you've got a cell phone, already you could be a unit in a network that does all sorts of interesting things if you use platform thinking. To say that if we're building platforms to provide, like what we do as Black Umbrellas, we've got a virtual incubation platform, for example, that provides incubation services to anybody who's got a device on the internet at their own pace, in their own time, outside of working hours. I think you would know in terms of how that model works for us. But what it really does is that it frees up the entrepreneur to be able to pursue their business during the day and do their development as and when they've got time, at their own pace. So then by bringing together various platforms to provide non-financial support, financial support, the lead generation, access to supply chains, corporate and non-corporate supply chains. These are all things that are possible.
Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, I think we need to get to a point as a country, and especially as civic society organizations, we need to get to a point where we organize ourselves, structure ourselves accordingly, and put in the necessary systems in place to be able to do what society should do, and stop the mentality or the thinking that we need to rely on government or rely on corporates. Because at the end of the day, government will do government and corporate will do corporate. So it's probably about time that civil society does civil society. Thank you.
Lynette, host. Is it for me too? Is there a final question? There is no final question. Do you have a question? Do you have a question? Do you have any closing comments?
Maybe just one thing is that I loved what you were saying about collaboration, and I think it is possible. I think particularly if you're aligned in terms of the impact that you want to have, because if it's only for your own self-interest, then that breaks down the collaboration. So we believe fully in working together, and I think that is what we need to think, is that we need to think broader. I love the comments that were said. It's not only South Africa, it's Africa. We've got a whole world that we, are able to service. So the pie is big enough. It's actually quite huge. It's infinite in a way, the possibilities. So I love that thinking towards that. Let's think of how we can do that well. Thank you.
I just wanted to emphasize when you speak about participation in the economy and that access to market, it's not just listing on a database or providing free access to SCNet or whichever. It's also about going one step ahead and actually taking myself as a practice and actually doing the introduction, because in business people do business with people they like, people who your friends have referred you to them, and also if you are a big enterprise like SAICA ED where they've given you a stamp of approval, if you're just a nobody, yes, listed on a database, great, but there is no private entity that is going to come and approach you. And even if you do approach them, they already have question marks. Who are you? What have you done? Etc. They don't really give you that opportunity to actually have a sit down and a face-to-face. So it goes beyond just that. So I just wanted to just put that out there and clarify it.
Understood.
Look, the collaboration point is a very important one. And perhaps as the business forum, it's one of the initiatives that you can run with and drive it. And obviously, you're at a better position to know who are the different role players that can drive this particular change. Sitting here, I'm realizing that there's quite a number of initiatives that are happening out there, but they're happening in silos. We're not good at sharing information amongst ourselves as a profession. Thank you.
Maybe challenge to yourself leading this particular forum. The first, I think, Sbu, for me, there needs to be real leadership engagements with the Department of Small, is it, what do we call
Small
it?
business.
Small business, that's right. Because, we talk of these things as well, I think at a policy level as scattered. We talk about small business, but this is ESD is a huge element of that, and I think we need to have broader discussions of how that value can actually be added in that entire value chain of the small business department. So I put it to you as a challenge. And the second challenge is actually talking about global competitiveness of then the small businesses that we are producing. Should not be for South Africa. The market is shrinking. We've all heard about the growth predictions literally below 2%. And that cannot be necessarily healthy. We need to think beyond the shores of South Africa. So how do we unlock value for ourselves beyond here? And we've got quite a number of advantages. We talk about skills as a critical sort of maybe element that we have from a South African perspective, particularly accounting skills. So how then do we put our heads together as maybe smaller and business, including ourselves, to then say we actually lift and rise a little bit of exporting our skills and everything else that comes from South Africa to attract a bit more into our economy.
Thank you. And I think me closing, and I accept the challenge, and I think when I started earlier on in terms of introducing what the Business Forum is all about, I did mention that one of our challenges is, attracting more members onto the business forum, more committee members onto the committee of the business forum to have capacity, but also attracting sponsors to come and give funding to the business forum so that we don't end up using membership fees, so that we can really, create programs that can address these challenges. I can't move if I don't have cash. So I am going to be knocking on your doors. It's a challenge that I'm not saying, I'm just saying that I will be knocking on your doors. We need to get sponsorships for this forum so that we can start getting and being really active and proactive in this, the objective that we're trying to achieve. So thank you.
Thank you to our panel. And even to you, our audience. I really loved the challenge that has come from our audience today. And I hope what you heard and the responses to the very real challenges that you face on the ground, and what's been heard by those who have the capacity to resolve them is going to perhaps be the very first engagement, is to really get them listed down somewhere and get that stakeholder engagement, management, building of new bridges, burning old ones if they're going to light the way, if that's the case. And, and so, from that perspective, I think, that's perhaps then the first action. And then I think then it goes. Also, just loved the idea about expanding our lens, and thank you very much to Usiswetu, was it Bai, or is it Gabech these days, for starting us on that point, because I think sometimes, yes, we limit business to 3 major cities, where we live in a country with, 59, 60 million people across 9 provinces. We have satellite provinces like Lesotho, Swaziland, and other smaller nations. But also, a wonderful point came from the floor that why are we thinking small? And I think especially when we use the acronym SME, in ESD. That word, that acronym, I hate it because SME always keeps us small. It keeps us mentally small, it keeps our actions small, and it doesn't say to us, I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has a passport. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room has a social media account. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room and or their business, whether they work for that business, they represent that business, has a website. And as long as there's a www and an internet that people have to jump onto, it just means your next client is in China. It means your next client is in Silicon Valley. It means another client is in Amsterdam. And because we have been referenced and locked into the constraints of definition, EMEs, ESQ, and all of that scorecardy thing that we do in South Africa, it also constrains our ability to think about our businesses as engines of change, engines of impact, profit engines as well. Well, guys, this is not charity. Business is not charity. And therefore, even the initiatives to build business cannot be treated like charitable endeavors. And so this two-way value and the communication that comes from it, so you made the point that it can't just be about taking an extraction, there's also got to be a two-way value that is exchanged. We've also really on our side, being the audience side, the entrepreneurs, the business builders, really start thinking about what do I bring to the table, we like that question in other spaces and circles, but what do you and your business bring to that other partner's table? Because I think we can hear here that even on the other side of the table, they are looking to solve, they are looking for X factors, they're looking for quality. Quality is an issue that's been raised, but you're looking for that. If you have quality or need to improve systems for quality, well, then, you know, but you know what you're doing, then that's the value you bring to the table. And you're saying, I need support in that specific space and place. So that articulation, I think, of need as well as demand, what's available for supply, and even the areas that we need to change, collaborate, and of course, build competitive businesses because we have to compete. You know, in South Africa, we kill the competition, KZN tendencies, but you know, every time somebody here on stage, every time somebody here on stage said business forum, I said, "Eish." I was just like, "Eish." Tendencies. But that's exactly the language and tendencies that we need to step away from. Because if we're not building competitive businesses, we are in fact shooting the agenda of sustainability in the foot. You can only grow if people have choice, a market, access to that market, and those factors at play. So to the business forum, the ABASA Business Forum, you have a great many challenges ahead of you, but also to the membership, keep them under pressure, right? I need to, they receive communication. Salo here said, busy, booked and busy in his emails, etc. Keep them under pressure. Advocate for what you want. If they're not creating it, get other members, because I'm pretty sure right now you're sitting with someone next to you, somebody across the room who has the same or similar challenge. Do something about it. You're already in this business and in this space. You have email. Do something about it then, and then keep the momentum of that conversation going. And I think that's really what we're being asked to do here today, is not to sit back and wait for whoever they is, but to be busy, to be productive in resolving the challenges, but also building on what we have already catalyzed and started. So thank you to our panel. Thank you so, so much for your contributions. At this point, please can I welcome back to the stage. I'm looking for them. I can see one of your speakers, and I'm hoping that they can just get really quickly mic'd up. The team that's going to take us into the lab. Lunch, they stand between us and lunch. And as you know, indlala ibanga ulaga. But they promise us that it's going to be fun and interactive and definitely worth our while just to engage with them and listen to what they have prepared for us as part of the lab. To those of you who are interested, after lunch, Old Mutual, as one of the sponsors, are here, and they will be hosting a financial education workshop at 2 o'clock. It's going to take place, okay, I don't have a venue, but it's clearly going to be in and around the same precinct where we are now, but it is at 2 o'clock. You know, if you want to go hear about how to manage your money, budgets, you know, wills and all of these interesting estate-related, personal finance, topical issues. Perhaps you've just got a question. The professionals are here to support this event as sponsors, but they've also brought professionals to support us in our personal capacity. So please do use that platform as well. The ladies are just getting mic'd up at the back, and I'm going to let them come forward. Thank you very much as well to our online audience for joining us this afternoon, and I certainly hope that we'll have an opportunity as the conference carries on, you know, to hear from you, whether it is via the chat or email. You're welcome to pop questions through. There are also still plenaries tomorrow morning, so stay tuned for those as well. To the members of the audience, I'm just checking back to the various notes as well. The AGM is also still on, so to those of you who would like to attend, I'm advised that it's at 4 o'clock in accordance to the program that I have been handed. So I guess if you have any official business at the AGM this afternoon, please during lunch just make sure that you touch base with our registration desk, and they will assist you with making sure that you are at the right place at the right time. Are we ready? Are we ready? Okay, I just saw somebody there at the back mic'd up. All right, let's go. Thank you.
Hi again. So it's not deja vu. You saw me this morning. We were hoping to have a bit of a different session. Instead of just talking as we normally do when people come to an ICC, regardless whether it's City ICC or Durban ICC or any other, or Santon Convention Center, we thought let's do it a bit differently and walk away not just with things to think about, but to also get a lot of what you're saying and crystallize that into action so that the next time you see me again and you have deja vu for the third time, we can actually rather speak to how we are implementing and using some of your inputs to change the way we do things and improve the business forum. And to that end, what we thought we'd do to facilitate more open discussion and expand how we think about things is get panelists who can share openly their experiences, their failures, their successes, but also their aspirations from where we feel they've walked and the journey they've had so far. And in short, we've got 3 panelists. We're not going to have a conventional panel because I think everybody needs to have lunch now. We're getting hungry. But what we're going to do is allow them to speak to their story and continue with the conversation over lunch. And to extend it beyond, because it doesn't end with lunch, we're going to actually send out surveys so that we can get a lot of the inputs that you have. Not everybody is going to get an opportunity to speak in this room. So we're going to send surveys out and really get your inputs and your thoughts around the value proposition. What are the pain points? Are we actually dealing with the real issues and getting down to the bottom of the challenges that you're experiencing? And also stretching ourselves in terms of breadth as well. As I'd said earlier, it's not just about accounting and auditing. There's so many other things that are out there and other services that can be provided. So also stretching us in that sort of direction as well. And what we're then going to do is allow our 3 panelists to speak to their story, and then we'll close off the session after that, or hand back to you, Lynette. But to introduce our 3 speakers, we've got Emma Mashilwane, the CEO and founder of ABASA, and she'll share her journey in starting a professional services firm and how to look beyond the challenges to find opportunities. We've got Sati Goundan, chairman of the ABASA Business Forum Advisory Council, and he'll share his experience in growing an audit firm from the bottom up, and the role of strategic partnerships, but not just in a fluffy way. I think having gone through numerous partnerships to get to where he is today, he can actually share some of the insights, which is what we want. And then we've got Bojane Segoa, the CEO of Levels App. And with her, we're going to focus on the role of disruption and thinking beyond what is out there. So I think we're going to start with you, Emma, from where you're sitting. And I'm not going to steal the limelight. I'll walk off the stage. Sisego, you'll assist. Oh, and we're not going to have a Q&A, by the way. We're going to end with what they've said, and we'll allow you to interact with them over lunch and ask them additional questions, maybe some of the secret sauce around how they got into this panel as well.
We're hoping everything was.
How do we know
above
this is
board.
on? Do you know?
Just check to see.
Emma, I'll give you a chance to
Still
speak.
don't.
Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Emma Mashilwane. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ABASA Auditors. So just for those who don't know who's ABASA Auditors, I'm sure you've heard the name. And at some point I felt like, oops, we feel, it sounded like we're the naughty people around. We are an internal audit, external audit, and advisory practice. We've been around since 2018. And we are a beneficiary of the ABASA Business Forum. We are one of the 2 firms that is part of the pilot to roll out the collaboration with KPMG. And we also a beneficiary on the ESD program of the Auditor General of South Africa. And I must say, I was really encouraged by what Bongani was talking about, because those are really the challenges that he's thrown at me and my partnership, to say you cannot just be relying on the AG to sustain your firm. And we've taken that challenge very seriously. Currently, our portfolio of clients, we are skewed 60%, actually close to 70%, private sector listed entities, and we benefit from the public sector for the remainder. So that's part of the challenge of making sure that you build a credible but also a sustainable firm from a financial point of view, but also to create a pipeline of exposure and for the team that we have. So I often get asked this question: why didn't you just go into corporate? I mean, having been in the in the audit space, I think the other day I was kind of realizing that maybe Sati and I are real elders here, because I qualified, I stopped counting, maybe 17 plus years ago. And the profession has changed. It really has transformed. And it's good transformation, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I guess that's one of the things that, kind of challenged me to start an audit practice. Having started my career in a global firm and having seen the challenges that a black child experiences in big spaces, big corporate, and some of them haven't gone away. It's one of the reasons why I felt I wanted to create a platform for that child like myself, who comes from rural Limpopo, rural KZN, rural Eastern Cape, because that's really where we get our teams from. These are gems that we go out there and find them, and it's kids that probably their environments would have overwhelmed them when they compete with kids from other urban areas where there's more access. So that's the platform that I started, and I continue to make sure that when we look for our IT trainees, our SAICA trainees, we are accredited with SAICA, we are accredited with the IIA, we go for the gems. We go out there, we work with UNISA, we work with UJ and UP in particular to find those girls that have potential. And some of them, I must be honest, they're shy. I was once a shy rural girl, and somebody gave me a chance, and I ended up in a global firm. So this is how I go and find the team, the A team, as I call them. We groom them, and we see potential in them, and it's really about the attitude, wanting to learn, the drive to come out of their circumstances, and that's how we've picked up our trainees. Some of the lessons I've learned along the way, I won't repeat. I mean, the past panel, it felt like they stole my whole script. I think access to market is the number one challenge for any firm. And I like what Lynette said. When I started MASA, I refused to be called small black audit firm. To me, it was it was to get access, but I will not remain small. I will dream big, and that's why I can proudly say the team who are with me down there, actually we service US-listed clients as well, because we've gone beyond the borders. It's not just about confining ourselves to servicing just local businesses. We want to expand and give our teams exposure to the global stage, because we operate in a global environment. So the first thing around access to market is, I always say to people, you can get access to market. There's another word that's been used, which is collaboration, but be careful what collaboration means. Because as a smaller firm, I'm big, but a smaller firm, let's use those words for today, collaborating is not about body shopping. I need to clarify that. If you want to build a credible firm, we need collectively, and we're challenging each other, to challenge the bigger firms not to use us as a stopgap for resources, but to carve out sections of the work that we are doing and have ABASA run it end to end. That way, when that third year, who now leaves, if they've completed their articles, they are not leaving with that experience. But we've actually created a track record to say MASA can deliver financial services clients. Because as a firm, we've got an audit team from the partner down to the first year that has delivered an audit. So lesson number 1, collaborate, but make sure that it's not at the expense of building a track record. It's actually credible, it's not about body shopping. That's the body shopping. So that's the first lesson I learned. The second lesson was, why must somebody support me? You know, if you look at the BE levels of all the bigger firms, they're level 1, level 2. They've got big size capacity. Why must they support me? So it comes back to making sure that you define your why. Because when all else fails, if you do not understand why MASA exists, what is your value proposition? What are you there for? Why must Avis, which is got the banner outside, why must they support me versus supporting the next firm? So it's really about defining your why, and your why will drive your passion. Because at the end of the day, it's really about making sure that the passion sustains the firm. A firm that does not have passionate professionals will probably fail on day 1, because passionate professionals do not allow themselves to not focus on quality, to be obsessed with their clients, and to learn. So those are the things around the why. You need professionals that understand your passion, your vision as a founder. Because often, when a founder leaves, the business fails. And we've seen that many times. So even myself, as the majority shareholder, I always say to my team, understand the vision. It's not my vision, it's our vision. Because there's a time where I need to blow a whistle on myself to say, this firm can sustain itself without me around. One last thing is it also links to teams. The first thing that I always focused on was to make sure that I build a strong team around me, because I cannot do everything. On day 1, Sbu, I was the CFO, I was the head of HR, I was the head of marketing, and I nearly burned out, because you cannot do all these things on your own. And also, I'm not an HR professional. I'm just an accountant, and I need to focus on running the business from a core business point of view. So the third lesson is build a strong team. Build a team that understands your vision, but a team that is just as obsessed about the vision as you are. So that's very key. And also, don't just throw that team to the wolves. Invest in your team. A lot of entrepreneurs, we do not invest in our teams. And we expect our teams to bring in the bacon, but they don't know what they are supposed to deliver on. So the fourth lesson is invest in your team, because when your team is got the adequate knowledge, they will service your client. When they are motivated and they are inspired, they will service your clients. So I'm just going to pause there. I know I only had 10 minutes. Hopefully I've managed to cover a few of the key points I wanted to.
I hope it doesn't feel like you stole his script.
I hope not.
I don't know if this is it working? Okay. So I'm going to take you through a journey. That's my journey, and how ABASA played a critical role in our journey from being a sole practitioner to where we landed. So I started practice in 1991, and being I was an active ABASA member by that time as well. And we found that ABASA was doing a lot of school visits and career guidance and all the nice things, trying to get the pipeline through in terms of qualifying black chartered accountants. Then most of us had qualified by 91, around that time. So we started practices, because remember, when you're working for the big corporates, you're not owning something. So we wanted to own this space. And I started just like you. I started doing everything. So I started as a sole practitioner. I opened office with no staff. So I was doing the books, I was writing the books, I was answering the phone, I was doing everything. And then a month later, I appointed a secretary, receptionist and secretary. And, well, your secretary used to do everything, type balance sheets and everything else. And then thereafter, the first clerk and the second clerk and third clerk. So the journey was in 91 I started. In 93, the ABASA members who were practitioners came together. We called ourselves the ABASA Practitioners Forum. So the ABASA Practitioners Forum, so 93, 94, remember there was a change in regime in 94. So we were knocking at the doors of the Transnets, all the SOEs. The Auditor General was white at that time, I mean, the AG himself. So we were knocking at these doors, and doors were not opening for us. So it was a difficult period in our lives. And we were predominantly servicing SME markets. So we were not exposed to public sector, big corporates, let alone listed entities. So in 93 we got together and we said, let's do this so that we can start standardizing our approach, our methodology and all of those things. So 93, 94. So in 1996, there was a breakthrough where the minister at that time of DPE, Stella Sitrao, she approached, through her advisor, approached us to say, you guys need to consolidate and come together, because as one man and two man practices, you cannot take on big assignments. So she facilitated, via advisor, we got the Practitioners Forum together, and and the only way to do it, you can't go loosely as a Practitioners Forum, so we had to form a company. And the company, we named it appropriately APF, and it stood for the ABASA Practitioners Forum, Incorporated. So we incorporated member firms. So at that time we had 18 we had 12 CA practices, and we had 6 bookkeeping and other services. So the 12 practices at that time were 1- and 2-man shows. So we incorporated, so every one of us became members of ABASA Practitioners. Sorry, I'm saying it wrong. APF Incorporated. So, and then immediately in that year, we were giving 10% of, so it was towards the end of the audit of Transnet. So we were given the audit of Transnet. It was about 5%. And that 5%, so we were doing the review of files. So we were working, remember we had small staff, very few staff, not exposed to something as big as this. And then we were working really overtime. So during the day, we go to the clients, and at night, we're reviewing files. So it was a difficult period, but we had to prove ourselves. And at that time, Ernst & Young were the signing partners, and a lot of the audits within the Transnet divisions were Ernst & Young and Deloitte. So the lessons we learned is we had to put in the effort to show that, remember, ABASA is about black excellence. So we could not falter. We were given this opportunity, now we can't falter this. So we had to work overtime, make sure that, and we were doing project management to say, where's your clerks going to be for the day, for this week, where the plan. Remember, this is a huge company. So we came to the party, and we realized there's nothing magical about what the Big Four were doing. We were just as capable. We all trained in big firms. We know the intricacies. So we are doing what we're supposed to do, but we were not given that opportunity.
Mm.
So now we've got the foot in the door. We were working overtime to just prove ourselves. So that's the story. We were given 10%, it moved to 5%, 10, then it moved to 20%, then 30%, then we were given 50%, Ernst & Young and us were signing off, and then eventually we went to 100%. This whole APF incorporated. So APF is a success story of the accounting profession. And then, so what happened is from 96 when we formed APF until we collapsed APF in the year 1999. A lot of mergers were happening within. So you found that we had the 12 CA firms, about 3 of them, which is Manasseh, Ingabani, and Unaid Wajah. The rest of us consolidated and merged with, so we formed big firms. I mean, Kubota Incorporated, KMT Bray, Sizwe and Suluba. Kubota came much later. So those were 3 big black firms. And then KMT merged with KPMG. So in Konki was part of Sizwe and Suluba. In Konki it was at that time. So that was a merger, but later she went out on her own. The Kubota guys were myself. It was the Western Cape branch of KMT, our practice. So I started off as a one-man show. Before we did the merger with Kubota, we were a 3-man show because there's one person can charge out so many hours. so we merged with, we added on 2 other partners. And then you had Hansti Patel and, and then Kubota was an existing firm, so we merged our practices. So we became critical mass, we created critical mass to take on larger assignments. So by the time we exited Transnet, and remember, transformation was happening through Transnet, and then there was a change of management, and they cut all of that. So Deloitte became the 100% partner thereafter, and with one of the firms partnering at 20%. So I won't mention the CEO's name, but that's what happened at that time. So she undid, so you know it's a she, undid transformation. So we built, but at that stage, we had approached the AG. We got, when we started off with the AG, it was about 10% black firms, and it was across the board. APF was, and we could not open APF to other people because there were lots of people coming and knocking at the door. We said, this is a firm just like your Deloitte or the KPMG of the world. You can't, we had a risk management profile, so we could not open the door to anybody. So we were running these practices as a separate firm. We had an allocation, we had methodology, all of those things. So when the Transnet thing came to an end, then all of the firms could stand up on our own. And then we started taking on assignments in the public sector. So that experience we got created, leapfrogged us into taking on large assignments. So I mean, each of those big firms could take on a substantial amount of AG work. We could go to the other SOEs within Transnet and take on assignments. And some of the success stories are, and I can give you my personal experiences. In one of the entities, we were partnering with PwC. So it's Kubota partnering with PwC. We were only given 10% of the audit. So, but as you mentioned, the audit committee chairperson had insight and vision to say, in 5 years' time, I want you to take over this audit. So, over the years, we took over, 10, 20, 30, 40. Then in the last year, before it went out to retender, so we were 50% with PwC. So when we retendered, we got the whole audit 100%. So it means that you can gain experiences through different mechanisms as well. So yeah, so that's the story of how ABASA played a critical role in transforming this profession and giving everybody opportunities to grow, which we never would have fathomed or thought about, that one day we would be signing off on such large clients. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll hand over to the youngster in the...
Is this on? Okay. Thank you very much for your words of wisdom. Thank you, Masa. Yeah, my name is Bojane Sehoa. Apparently, I'm the youngster. I don't feel very young these days, but I do work extensively with the youth. I know I am the last speaker, the absolute last speaker, so I really am the one standing between you and lunch, so I'll keep it nice and short. Thank you very much to ABASA for the invitation. I consider ABASA my professional home. It's very lovely to see a lot of familiar faces at least once a year, and to make new friends and meet new ones, you know, and to build networks, etc. So certainly a very special group, and even better further still post-COVID. So I wear many hats, but the primary hat that I would say I wear is really that of an innovator, you know, and I've been asked to speak specifically on disruption. And I think if you're building a career that you would like to be the career that will set you apart from your peers, you know, it really would be anchored in innovation. So doing things differently, taking risks, and, you know, charting and, you know, or going into uncharted territories and entering uncharted waters and doing things that go against the grain. So I do sit on boards of companies as an NED and an Audit and Risk Committee chair. I do lecture at UNISA. I have a passion for education. My bosses here are executive dean and deputy executive deans. I have to be very careful what I say. So I lecture accounting to aspiring chartered accountants, and I also invented an award-winning app for secondary school learners, and it assists them to apply to university, for bursaries, and to TBET colleges. And, you know, it's really been an incredible journey. And I think how I was able to get all of that done was fundamentally, you know, to anchor my career in education, to decide what my hustle is, you know, and my hustle is education. I'm an educator, I come from a stock of educators, and that is where my heart is always drawn to. I started out at, you know, I didn't go the audit route, which is probably how I started charting my own territory and, you know, doing my own thing and going against the grain. When everybody else was going tip and earning really nice salaries, I went top. There was still a distinction back then. And then when everybody was aspiring to be a financial manager, I knew that that was not something that I wanted to do or would ever want to do. I knew that I wanted to work in education. I had already started formulating the idea for Levels app, which is the name of the app. And that set me on the journey of a lifetime. You know, I decided I wanted to go into education. So I, you know, joined UNISA. And you become a subject matter expert because you are literally interacting with all of the different legislation, all of the different compliance elements that a business would need. So suddenly it opened up doors for NED roles. And, you know, it really is just about doing things differently, taking risks, not really doing what your peers are doing or not going with popular wisdom. Yes, there are spaces for your CFOs of this world and your financial managers of this world and your partners of this world. That's not for me, and it never was. And it's not something that I would have ever wanted for myself. And instead, you know, the universe provided something which was, you know, spectacular in its own way. So how do you become a disruptor? You know, that's really what you do. Focus on what you are passionate about, work very hard, you can't escape that, put in the hours, you know, do the grind, and don't try to avoid shortcuts, and yeah, you know, chalk some of it to fate, and attend sessions like this. It's the easiest way to build social capital. It's the easiest way for you to really make a name for yourself and to be seen, as it were. So thank you very much. Ashley will be exchanging notes with President Sathi over lunch about how to improve the work of the Business Forum, and we look forward to your commentary in that regard. Thank you.
I just want to say there's a very big difference between a disruptor and a destructor.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. This is So insightful. I think everybody's probably
Hungry.
yearning to go next door. Lynette, where's Lynette? All right.
So I was hardly interrupted.
Yeah. At all. At all.
The better part of it is interaction.
Exactly. But I think the other panel took way too long. Yeah. Yeah.
So your facilitator had to quickly go and catch a flight, I think back to Johannesburg. So he's on his way. So I'll thank you on his behalf for joining the panel and just, giving us so much to think about, yeah. Lunch will be served or is already served. I think we've asked them to reheat. So if it tastes weird, I'm sorry. It's been out there for a while. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you to everyone as well who has sat here from, I think some people came at 8, some people came at 7:30. So they've been here the whole day, and I know the other engagements that people had for today. So thank you for taking the time to come and join us. Please do enjoy lunch. I'll call on Spoo to close off. Why do you look shocked? You're still the chairperson.
I think right now I'm like everything. The receptionist, Yo, okay, so, I'd like to give a vote of thanks to, firstly, our sponsors. I mean, they are there, the banners, Old Mutual, MASA, we had SAPRO that has been consistent right throughout. And now I don't know all of them now because I've been put on the spot, but I know those are one of the few sponsors. I know AGSA definitely was one of our sponsors. So thank you very much for that, for our sponsors. Our past presidents, I mean, President Sate was the first, he's always the first past president to arrive at events. He has done so consistently as well today, our past president, Ashley. We're thanking the president because she's been running around. We've got a career expo upstairs. So she's up and down, and I know there were some technical glitches in the morning, just in terms of access and the registration, etc. But I think she's been able to manage that quite well. Thanks to our panelists our panelists, the first panelists arrived at 7:40, and I think I was taking a shower at that time. I was like, okay. I said, we'll be there shortly. But really waited throughout the entire time, even when we were like, we don't know when we're going to start the program, but really we're very, 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 very patient. And I thank you for their flexibility as well, because we had to shift the times. So we appreciate that. And then for the members and then the attendees, thank you very much. Our guests, Saipa, we thank you. When did you arrive? But I thank you. No, I'm thinking now. Okay. So, and then, yeah, just everybody who's just attended and who's just made this Indaba a success, I thank you.